President Trump is bringing his crime crackdown to Portland with full force, posting on Truth Social, quote, at the request of Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, I am directing Secretary of War Pete Hegseth to provide all necessary troops to protect war-ravaged Portland and any of our ICE facilities under siege from attack by Antifa and other domestic terrorists.
But local Democrat leaders, they're pushing back, with Oregon's governor insisting they don't need any help. Watch.
There is no insurrection, there is no threat to national security, and there is no need for military troops in our major city.
Wish you could see some of those images. Look at that. Just a peaceful protest. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is vowing strong action to keep agents safe.
Anyone who threatens or assaults our federal officers will be arrested and charged federally, not in some liberal state court. Same goes for anyone who's funding and aiding these extremists. You will be dismantled brick by brick.
Attorney General Pam Bondi also announcing that she has deployed federal agents to ICE facilities nationwide to protect ICE agents from what she calls a new era of political violence. Let's bring in the story host, Martha MacCallum, who is filling in this morning for Fox News Sunday. Great to see you this morning, Martha.
Hi.
It really is amazing the way President Trump has managed to get Democrats to defend the most indefensible things.
Yeah, it is, especially when you look at the juxtaposition of those images. You see the governor out there, Tina Kotek, talking about how peaceful everything is. And it does remind you of the summer of 2020 in Seattle when we heard about the summer of love and we saw what was happening there. I think what you're seeing is President Trump very disturbed by these attacks and threats on ICE facilities and ICE agents. And I think maybe as heartbreaking as all of it was the death of one of the detainees in Texas this week. And we've heard about this domestic terrorism crackdown, Antifa in that category. The president may run into legal challenges on that designation, but I think what we're seeing is President Trump pushing to make a very strong statement that he doesn't want Antifa or any of these protesters attacking ICE facilities, attacking government buildings, and the presence on the ground is going to reinforce that. So he's going to run into these hurdles like he's running into with the governor in Washington. But I think that it's the statement and the message that's being sent to be protective towards these agents, because there's a lot of fear. I talked to Todd Lyons about it a couple days ago. They're very, very concerned about the safety of their agents.
Yeah, no question about it. September 12th, during a traffic stop, you know, we saw an ICE agent dragged with his vehicle, multiple ICE officers assaulted in Illinois on September 19th. And of course, on September 24th, the sniper fired from a rooftop in Dallas, targeting agents. So I think, you know, none of us will be surprised if we hear that an ICE agent is killed in the near future. And so what you're talking about with Lyons is him saying, hey, this has got to stop. But also, Martha, what I'm seeing is a lot of organization on the part of these rioters. Who is funding them? What is behind this? Do you know that the Trump administration is looking into that? Because if they don't have the money to organize, they won't be out there.
Yeah, you know, I think it's interesting, the analogies that are being made between the structure of some of these organizations and what we saw with al-Qaeda and ISIS. It's a low-level outreach that is being absorbed mostly by isolated young men, as we've seen in case after case. And they are very vulnerable, I think, to this kind of brainwashing that's happening online. And there is a huge investigation underway right now to figure out who's putting out those messages. We also heard from the FBI, from Kash Patel, when he was asked, do you think that there's any foreign algorithms that are also trying to juice this chaos in America? He said yes. So I think that, you know, this investigation is merited and really important to get at the heart of what's going on, because there's a lot of chaos that's being cultivated in a lot of very scary and very difficult to crack down on ways.
Martha, let me bring you back to ICE for a second, because we also spoke to acting ICE Director Todd Lyons on this show yesterday. I talked to him on a fairly regular basis. for reporting. And he said, Martha, that in the more than 20 years he's been doing it, there's never been a threat level against ICE officers. And there certainly weren't these online apps that were pinpointing exact time and locations of these agents conducting federal immigration law enforcement. And he says, Martha, that unless particularly Democrat politicians' rhetoric doesn't come down, that this could get worse. What do you make of that?
Well, I think, when you look at that attack in Texas, we did a story down there. We talked to a number of the agents at that ICE facility in Texas, Griff, and one of the agents that we spoke to when we were there was one of the individuals who ran out into the oncoming sniper fire to get into the van to try to protect the detainees who were in that van. Those individuals are heroes. And I think that the effort to protect these ICE agents is so extensive because they are carrying out the laws that are on the books, as Kristi Noem said. And I think that, in terms of figuring out who's behind this, it's very, very tricky. I think, as I said, these are, very sort of low level. You can ask Democrats to stop calling them Nazis and fascists. That is definitely a step in the right direction. But I think the seeds of reaching out to some of these individuals is very deep and it's very broad in terms of the dark places of the internet. So this is going to be an issue for quite a while, I think.
Yeah, and dark money. I mean, we were reporting earlier today on the Obama Foundation. We found out that there's dark money, $2 million that went to the Tides Foundation. The Tides Foundation then sends the money out to different NGOs and activist groups on the left. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if money from something like that ends up in funding these types of groups. They don't just show up. There is an organization, and they're funded by dark money. So hopefully we'll get to the bottom of it. You, of course, will be on Fox News Sunday. Tell us what else you have going on.
So my sit down with Vice President Vance, we're going to talk about what's happening in Ukraine. You guys have been talking about these 500 drones overnight into Ukraine from Russia. A 12-year-old girl lost her life. There has been a huge sea change in the administration's approach to Ukraine. And we're also getting word of a $90 billion investment in new weapons. And Zelensky is suggesting that some talks regarding longer range missiles are also in the works. And you've seen what's happening with all of these drone incursions and jet incursions all along the border of Russia in countries that used to be part of Russia. It's raising so many questions about where all of this is headed. So we talk about that with Vice President Vance as well.
Indeed.
So important. And did I hear that you also have the president of Iran on today?
Yes.
That's amazing.
As you all know, here in New York, it has been United Nations General Assembly week. I sat down with the president of Iran. One of the things that he was most concerned about was that he didn't want these snapback sanctions. One of the things that doesn't get talked about a lot is how awful the economic situation, is in Iran. These snapback sanctions are going to clamp down on them. He wanted to push back on it. He was not successful because there are efforts to rebuild their nuclear program. So you'll see that as well coming up at the top of the hour or wherever you see it in your area.
Awesome.
Wow, great stuff, Martha. Great seeing you.
Thank you, guys. Great to see you too.
We'll be watching Fox News Sunday.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.